while going through Carlos Moore's book of FELA, I was enamored with his enthusiasm to capture FELA in all his nakedness, so to speak. International superstar in music, especially Latin music. And he said something concerning FELA I'd like you to shed, because as a close associate of FELA, I'd like you to shed some light on. I'll quote Gilmore in foreword to This Beach of a Life. He says, today, sometime after his passing, we are at a juncture when we recognize and acknowledge FELA's work, but we must confer another form of acknowledgement, one that goes beyond the careful reverential attention that increasingly is afforded his music, an acknowledgement in a wider intellectual sense, one rooted in careful analytical interpretation of what FELA and his work stood for. As a man writing about FELA, do you think the essence of FELA can be captured in a written form, in a documentary format? Knowing what we know about FELA, the lives he touched, the extent of his creativity, and the power of his popularity, so to speak. Do you think it can be captured in a written form, in a literary form?
I think it's impossible to capture it in one meeting. If you capture the documentary, for instance, it is possible to visually see what it is. But see, there are so many aspects to FELA, and so you still be at sea after watching the documentary. If you put a microphone here, for instance, and do a vox pop, ask everyone what he thinks about FELA and who FELA is. I mean, you have many respondents, as many views as possible. So there are so many aspects of FELA. There are very many, and it's not easy to capture FELA in one swoop.
I know Lindsay Barrett, my friend, you really shoot together in the 60s, I believe, and he wrote these books, some sort of introduction. It's called A Life and Sound That Has Refused to Be Silent by Near Death. In it, he also quoted that you were together because of the compilations we are playing and all that. Now, there's this quote I wanted to reveal what is said concerning FELA. It says, FELA tried to lead his music to the fullest. He did not just want to play music but to impose it on the community. This was not only a new and unusual formula for the musical world in Nigeria, but more importantly, it threatened the peace of mind of the Nigerian elite. FELA's voice was so strident and really so persuasive to the masses that the powerful felt that their authority could be undermined by his impulsiveness.
We have just remembered, what I've been talking about the political authorities and the government who were threatened. During his life, after 1970, after Buy Africa and Black Man's Cry, for instance, his life became so rebellious and the government became so threatened that he went to jail almost every month. And so in the end, we are told that in his career, he was questioned about 200 times. So that's the record. So it is not just the elite that was threatened, I think the government, because for instance, when he went to Accra, after he had that problem here, he might persuade the students against his government. So when Mr. Barrett was not referring to just everybody, I think he was talking about the government whom he was quarreling with.
Thank you very much. I'd like to talk about, you have documented an aspect that allows persona, so to speak, to the book. Let's talk about documentation as an area of art. FELA had so much contradiction, so to speak, even in his way he lived life. His concept about women, about sexuality, about religion, because many who were close to him evoked some contradictions. He was seen as an ordained democrat in his dealings in the commune, the KUTI Republic. He was like a king. Yet he was against power blocks and all that. Now, in documenting FELA through the poetic vein, are you able to capture his essence, his diversity, his contradictions and everything?
What I sought to do with this book, which is not yet out, quite frankly, but it's on its last stages. As you can see, from here it will move on. I am presently talking with the Lagos State government through a permanent secretary trying to push for it becoming a souvenir. I hope it gets through, and if it does, by next year, or before the end of the year, the book should be out by their grace. Documentation, it's interesting that Okedology and I are on this panel because there was a time I went to my former boss at Site Communication, who is now the MD, Mr. Jimmy, Awoshika. And I told him about this project and what I was going to do, using prose and poetry. I felt that people had done a lot on FELA through journalism. And I thought I should do it differently. I thought if language was, if language was the medium through which things got documented, using the word language that is broad in its broader sense, then it will be very good to look at the highest form of language, which is poetry, to see how that could be used to document FELA and its timelessness. Because I went to school with two of FELA's kids that I remember very well in school, in primary school, Femi and Shola. Shola I knew more closely, they were my seniors in school. And I recall very well on a particular day that FELA came to school. And the whole school was, that was Mary Magdalene. The whole school was agog, and the thinking there was that it was possible that our very strict gate man must have beaten Shola, and so FELA was angry and he came to school. And as a kid, seeing FELA live and direct was different, was interesting. Apart from the fact that Shola herself, being a student, being a pupil in the school, had a special status. Everybody looked at Shola differently. And in trying to use poetry as a means of capturing, of documenting FELA, I pursued what I call a FELA-centered biopoetry. And it in a sense answered your first question about if indeed FELA can be captured. And look at what was said here, which I will use in the preface I did. How does one piece into a pattern? And I was not the only one who had this challenge. One of the poets also captured it. That, how do you capture FELA? And in writing the preface to the book, I said this, marrying my view, my experience with this particular poet's, poem. How does one piece into a pattern this vast and varied collection of poems on FELA, minted from many musing minds, quoting the poets now, too loose to be gathered in one full swoop of whom fragments that defy a bond. End of quote. Like a sewing machine can travel through the tapestry of this wide fabric, can fathom imagined patterns, and sew the many poems together into a definable whole.
Legacy being kept, being sustained with the profundity of his own music and his character. Will Afrobeat soon become so commercial that the essence
is already commercial? You find that all the hip-hop stars who are now on the scene are mimicking FELA, and it's very good.
And so to answer your question, what FELA lost in fighting the government
Gained in the internationalization of his music.
In his lifestyle, while you were with him, were you not radicalized in any way? Did you not have a situation where you consider having 5 women, for instance, or smoke? It's given for granted that you will have spoken there anyway, because it's considered a natural gas. But I will let you speak.
Actually, at the time that I started with FELA, he was not radicalized in the sense that we saw him in later years. We started out as friends in 1963 when he came from Britain, and he was listening to radio, and I was presenting a program then called NBC Jazz Club, and he fell in love with it. It was the only program that he listened to.